Hey everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Crime. Tonight we're diving into a true psychological nightmare that unfolds deep in the heart of the desert. So grab your headphones, sit back, and prepare for what lies beneath. Colorado Desert. I want to tell you a story. One that isn't easy to tell, not because it's full of blood or gore or any of that typical horror movie stuff, but because it gets under your skin in a way that lingers, like a fever you can't sweat out. It's a story that starts with a road trip, innocent enough, but ends with a person unraveling in ways they never imagined. The setting? The vast, sun-bleached wasteland of the Colorado Desert. This is the story of Elias Maddox, a 32-year-old photojournalist who thought he was just chasing a story about a long-forgotten ghost town. Dustvale. Ever heard of it? Probably not. Most maps don't even show it anymore. Some say the wind buried it, others say it never existed at all. But Elias had read about it in a crumpled old newspaper he found at a roadside diner somewhere near Grand Junction. The article was barely legible, yellowed, torn at the edges, but it talked about a mining town that disappeared in the 1940s after a series of mysterious deaths. Not murders, not natural causes, just deaths, as if the desert had swallowed the people whole. That was enough to hook Elias. He needed a break from the noise of the city, from deadlines, relationships, and his own mind, which lately felt like a radio stuck between stations, always buzzing, never silent. So he packed his gear, some canned food and water jugs, and drove south until the cell service dropped out and the road turned to dirt. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. That was his first mistake. Elias had a 2006 Subaru Outback that rattled like bones in a sack every time it hit a bump, which in the desert was every few feet. But he didn't care. He was focused on finding Dustvale. The closer he got, the more the silence grew. Not just the absence of sound, but something heavier, like the air itself had gone still, like the wind was holding its breath. After about 6 hours of driving through terrain that looked the same in every direction, dried shrubs, cracked earth, a sky so blue it hurt to look at, he came across a rusted sign half buried in the sand. Dustvale, 7 miles ahead. The letters were faded, some eaten away by time. But it was there, proof that Dustvale was real. Elias stopped the car, got out and took a photo. The kind of shot that looks haunting in black and white. He smiled. He was getting close. The remaining 7 miles took another hour. The road was more of a suggestion than an actual path, winding through jagged rocks and old, gnarled trees that looked like they'd been burned and never fully died. The sun was sinking now, casting long shadows across the desert. That's when Elias saw it. The town. At first, it was just a blur on the horizon, like a mirage. But as he drove closer, the shapes solidified. Buildings, old wooden structures with slanted roofs and broken windows, a chapel with its steeple leaning like it was whispering something to the sky, a general store with the name barely hanging above the door, and silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that screamed. Elias parked near what looked like the sheriff's office and stepped out of the car. The wood under his boots groaned with each step. The town was coated in dust, like everything had been preserved under a fine layer of ash. He turned on his camera and started recording, narrating as he walked. "This is Dustvale," he said into the lens, "the town that vanished. What I'm looking at is a series of structures that appear to be at least 80 to 90 years old. No sign of wildlife. No signs of recent human activity, just silence." He paused, panning his camera toward the chapel. Something about it made him uneasy. There was a black smudge on the door, maybe old paint, or soot, or something else. He zoomed in, but the lens began to fog for a second. Not with humidity, just fogged. He wiped it, chalked it up to sand in the mechanism. Then the chapel bell rang. Just once. Not loud, Not dramatic, just a hollow metallic ding, like someone had lightly tapped it with a stick. Elias spun around, heart racing. There was no wind, no animals, no people. The bell tower was empty. He stopped recording. He stood there for several minutes, scanning every window, every rooftop, every alley. Nothing moved. It was like the town was waiting for something, or maybe watching. He shook it off, told himself the wind might have moved it just right. Or maybe there was some tension left in the metal from storms years ago. His rational mind was trying hard to explain something that didn't feel rational. By the time Elias finished exploring and recording the perimeter of the town, the sun had dipped behind the mountains and shadows blanketed the earth. He decided to sleep in his car that night, didn't want to risk setting up a tent on unknown ground. Too many scorpions, snakes, or worse, someone out there watching him. He locked the doors, pulled a blanket over himself, and tried to sleep. But something kept tapping on the windows. He told himself it was sand hitting the glass. Desert wind can kick up grains like bullets. But the sound was too rhythmic. 3 taps, then silence, then 3 more. He turned on his phone screen to check the time. No signal. Of course. 1:36 a.m. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Not outside, inside the car. He whipped around, flashlight in hand, heart pounding against his ribs like a drum. Nothing. Just his bag, the camera, the water bottles. But something was off. His blanket was on the floor of the car, crumpled in the passenger seat. He hadn't touched it. It had been covering him just seconds ago. He froze, eyes scanning every inch of the car, breath shallow. Slowly, he reached for the door handle, opened it, and stepped out into the night. The desert was freezing now, the stars like sharp ice above him. The town looked different in the dark, less abandoned, more waiting. Elias walked slowly toward the chapel, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. He didn't know why. Maybe to prove to himself that it was just a building, just wood and nails and shadow. But when he reached the door, he saw it up close. The black smudge. It wasn't paint, it was handprints. Dozens of them. Blackened like charcoal, smeared across the door and frame, like people had been pounding on it, begging to be let in or kept out. He reached out and touched one. Cold. Too cold for a desert night. He backed away and turned around quickly, but something caught his eye. A figure in the window of the sheriff's office. Just a flash, a silhouette, gone in an instant. He ran back to the car, jumped inside, and locked the doors again. This time, he didn't sleep. He just sat there, flashlight in hand, jumping at every sound. By sunrise, his hands were shaking. He wanted to leave, pack up and drive away. But something in him said no, not yet. He hadn't found the story, not really. He had seen something, felt something, and part of him, the part that was tired of feeling numb, wanted more. So he stayed. That was his second mistake. The day passed slowly, too slowly. Hours felt like days. He explored more of the buildings. The general store still had cans on the shelves, rusted, swollen. There was a journal behind the counter. The last entry was dated June 17, 1943. It read, "They say if you stay too long, the desert starts talking to you. But I don't think it ever stops talking. I think it whispers. I think it gets in your head." Elias took a photo of the page, but the image wouldn't save. Every time he looked at the playback, it was corrupted, glitched. The words were smudged out like someone had dragged their finger through them. Later, he found the mine shaft behind the town. The entrance was boarded up, but the boards looked recently disturbed, scratches on the wood, as if someone or something had tried to claw their way in. Or out. He didn't go in. Not yet. That night, the tapping returned. Louder, faster. Now it sounded like fingernails, and this time, it wasn't just the windows, It was the roof, the doors, the walls of the car. Something was circling. He covered his ears, closed his eyes, and whispered to himself over and over, "I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid." But the whispering started, not outside, inside his mind. A voice, female, faint, repeating the same phrase again and again. "You stayed too long." Elias screamed and turned on every light he had, flashlight, dashboard, even the car's hazard lights. The desert lit up in flickers of red and orange, and for just a moment, he saw them. Figures, standing in the distance, watching. Dozens, still, silent. When he blinked, they were gone. Elias didn't sleep that night either, and as the sun rose for the second time, something inside him cracked. He still hadn't entered the mine. But something down there was waiting, calling, and he was starting to listen. When the second sunrise crept over the edge of the desert, Elias Maddox was still inside his car, eyes bloodshot, face pale, hands trembling around a half-empty water bottle. The silence after the night's torment was worse than the whispers themselves. It wasn't relief. It was a pause, like the town was giving him space to decide. Dustvale hadn't spoken its final word. Not yet. Elias got out of the car, body stiff, jaw sore from clenching all night. The ground crunched beneath his boots as he walked, almost sleepwalking now. The air smelled metallic, faint, barely there but wrong, like rust mixed with something older, deeper. His camera was still slung over his shoulder, but he hadn't touched it in hours. Something had changed in him. The thrill of discovery had been replaced by something far more primitive. Fear, yes, but also curiosity. That kind of dark curiosity that drags people into basements when they should run. The kind that dares you to look over your shoulder, even when you know something's there. He hadn't imagined the voices. He knew that now. They didn't just speak. They sank in, left behind static in his skull. He could still hear that woman's whisper if he stood too still. "You stayed too long." The mine shaft had claw marks. He hadn't dreamt that. And there was something else he hadn't told the camera, hadn't even admitted to himself fully. In the reflection of the rearview mirror just before dawn, he'd seen someone sitting in the back seat. Only for a second. No eyes, just a silhouette. Long hair, pale hands resting calmly on their knees, watching him, quietly. When he turned, it was gone. Of course it was, and yet, he could still feel the weight where she had been. Elias knew what he had to do now. Every bone in his body begged him to leave, but the whispering wouldn't stop unless he went deeper. The mine. That was where it began. And maybe, just maybe, it was where it would end. He packed his backpack with supplies, headlamp, rope, camera, a flask of water, and a second flashlight. He left a note on the dashboard of his car, even though he knew no one would find it. It read, "If I don't come back, Dustvale is real, and it's not empty." The walk to the mine was short but felt endless. The desert had changed overnight. The air was thicker. No birds, no insects, no breeze. Just that low hum beneath the silence, like something huge was breathing just below the earth. The shaft entrance yawned open before him. The boards weren't just clawed. They were splintered, shattered outward, as if something had burst from below and left the exit open like a gaping mouth. He stepped inside. It was immediately colder. Not just from shade, bone cold. The kind of chill that came from places the sun hadn't touched in decades. His boots echoed on the rocky ground as he moved slowly, headlamp casting trembling light on the walls. Old mining rails snaked down into the darkness, curving left and vanishing into the earth like veins. He followed them, deeper. The smell got worse. That metallic tang grew sharper, mixed now with rot, decay, and yet there were no signs of animals, no bones, no nests, just nothing. As he descended, the whispering returned. Not a voice now, A choir. Low, fragmented. Like dozens of people speaking over one another, their words unintelligible, their breath brushing against the back of his neck. He spun around, flashlight cutting through the dust. Nothing. But he wasn't alone. He knew that now. There were moments, small, flickering seconds, when the walls seemed to pulse, breathing inward, then out. He blinked hard. Maybe it was the darkness, the claustrophobia. Maybe the mind was playing tricks. But then, he saw the door. Yes, a door. Deep underground, buried within the mine shaft, sat a wooden door built into the rock face. Old, rotted, but standing. There was something carved into the wood. Symbols, shapes, some of them vaguely human, others twisted and chaotic. There were no hinges, no handle. It shouldn't be there. He reached out, running his fingers along the carvings, and the voices stopped. Instant silence. The mine went dead. And then, the door opened. No noise. Just a creakless swing inward, revealing nothing but pitch-black shadow. He didn't move, not for a long time. But then the light behind him flickered and went out. Only his headlamp remained. The battery icon on his camera blinked red, and in that cold, empty space, something stepped forward. Not toward him, past him. A shape, thin, twitching. Its movement stuttered like broken film, appearing in one spot, then another. Closer, then back. Always flickering. Always wrong. It didn't touch him, but it spoke, or maybe it placed the words in his head. She's not gone. His knees buckled. He remembered something he hadn't thought about in years. His sister. Naomi. The one who disappeared when they were kids, vanished from a camping trip near Arizona, never found, not a trace. Elias had been 10. He'd been blamed, said he wandered too far from camp. He'd buried that pain under years of silence. Until now. Why now? Why here? He stared into the black doorway. Something was down there. Not just darkness. Memory. And maybe guilt. The figure disappeared again like it had never been. The door remained open. The air grew colder. The mine behind him collapsed in noise. A sudden crash. Distant, but real. Elias turned back. Dust filled the tunnel. One of the old supports must have cracked. Or maybe it wasn't old. Maybe it was planned. He was trapped now. There was only one way forward, and that was into the dark. So Elias stepped through the door. And the world changed. It wasn't a tunnel on the other side. It was a hallway. White, sterile, too clean for a mine. The air buzzed with fluorescent light, but the bulbs were invisible. The walls were smooth, cold. He walked. His boots echoed differently here, like hospital floors. And then came the sound. A music box. Soft, twinkling, a tune he recognized. Naomi's lullaby. He used to sing it to her when she cried during storms. He hadn't heard it in over 20 years. The hallway turned. A mirror stood at the end. And inside the reflection, Elias wasn't alone. A little girl stood behind him. Her eyes were completely black. She smiled. Whispers rose around him like a wave. He turned, fast, but the hallway was empty. When he looked back, the mirror was cracked. The girl was gone. But on the wall behind him, smeared in something dark and wet, were the words, "She remembered, do you?" Elias ran. He didn't remember moving his legs, but his body surged forward. The hallway stretched, lengthened, warped. The music box faded, then twisted into distortion, notes bending, melting. The door reappeared. He crashed through it and found himself back in the mine, or what looked like the mine. Except everything was wrong. The boards were new, the rails polished, tools still hanging on hooks, fresh with use, Voices echoed, real now, men shouting, laughing. The mine was alive. Somehow, he had gone back. Not just physically. Time was bending. He ducked behind a crate as two miners walked past, dressed in 1940s gear, headlamps bright, skins slick with sweat. They didn't see him. They couldn't. But he could see everything. A child's laughter echoed through the tunnel. A girl. He followed it, ran deeper into the glowing corridors of a past not his own, until he saw her. Naomi. No older than 6, wearing the same dress she wore the day she vanished, standing beside the same flickering shadow that had haunted the mine before. She turned to him, smiled, and whispered, "We never left." Then the lights went out, and Elias screamed. But no one heard. No one ever does. Elias Maddox didn't remember screaming. He didn't remember falling. But when he opened his eyes again, his throat was raw, and his lungs burned like he'd been clawing at the air for hours. He was on the ground, back in the mine, or at least something that looked like the mine. But it wasn't the same as before. The hallway he had run through, the one with the white walls and sterile lights, was gone. Now, the walls bled. Yes, bled. Thick streaks of what looked like rust but smelled like copper ran down the stone, slowly dripping into pools that shimmered darkly under his headlamp. The air was still, heavier than before. It pressed on his chest like invisible hands, like something was trying to pin him in place. He stood, legs unsteady. His backpack was still with him, but one of his flashlights was gone. His camera lay a few feet away, its lens cracked, the screen frozen on a still frame. A little girl standing in the mine with her back to him. He didn't remember taking the photo. He didn't want to remember. He grabbed the camera, turned it off, and shoved it deep into the pack. He couldn't look at it again. Not now. Something about seeing Naomi, his sister, lost so many years ago, standing in a place she never should have been, had broken something loose inside him. He had buried those memories under years of work, silence, and denial. And now Dustvale was pulling them back to the surface like bones rising from shallow graves. "You're not real," he whispered to the silence. "This place isn't real." But even he didn't believe it anymore. He had seen the past. He had walked through it, the miners, the sounds, the warm glow of lamps that hadn't lit in 80 years. Either he had finally lost his mind, or Dustvale wasn't just haunted, it was alive in ways the world wasn't meant to understand. And he was inside it. The mine pulsed around him now. That was the only way to describe it. Like breathing, like veins beneath skin. The ceiling groaned. The shadows shifted even when his light stood still, and every so often he'd hear footsteps, not echoing from behind, but beside him, in the stone, like something was walking through the walls. He needed to get out. That thought became a mantra, a lifeline. Get out, get out, get out. But the tunnels had changed. They twisted, rearranged. He would walk 30 feet, turn a corner, and end up back where he started. He marked the walls with chalk from his emergency kit. Circles, arrows, numbers, but when he came back to check them, they were gone. Or worse, changed. Once, the arrow he'd drawn was scratched over with a spiral. Another time, the number 3 was replaced with a smudged message. "You're not lost. You're chosen." Chosen? By what? His breath caught in his throat. His chest felt tighter with each passing minute. The air wasn't just thick, it was rotting, like the mine itself was dying, and he was inside its final gasps. After what felt like hours of walking in circles, Elias found something new. A room, or rather, a chamber. Large, circular, with a high ceiling supported by rusted beams. In the center sat a table, yes, an actual wooden table, intact, like it had been placed there only days ago. On the table were photographs. Dozens of them, all black and white, all faded at the edges. He stepped closer, hands trembling. Each photo showed a person, men, women, children, most in old-fashioned clothing. Their expressions were blank, their eyes empty, as if they'd been caught mid-thought. But that wasn't the part that chilled him. It was what they were standing in front of. The chapel, the general store, the mine, Dustvale, in different eras, different decades. In some photos, the town looked bustling, people smiling, horses hitched to posts, banners for festivals and harvest dances. In others, it was empty, abandoned, buildings collapsed, windows shattered, and in each one, standing just behind the crowd, was the same figure. A girl, black eyes, blank expression, barefoot. Naomi. He dropped the photo he was holding, backed away from the table. This didn't make sense. How could she be in pictures from before she was born, from different eras, unless time didn't work here? Unless Dustvale chose its people. He felt the walls contract again, and then came the whisper. Not soft this time, louder, firmer. You brought her here. You forgot. His knees buckled. No, he said out loud, shaking his head. No, I didn't. But a memory bloomed. Sharp, sudden. That camping trip. 1999, Arizona border. He remembered more than he'd admitted. Naomi had wandered into the trees. He'd followed her. But he hadn't looked hard enough, hadn't screamed her name, hadn't told their parents the truth, because he had seen something. A door. Not in the woods. In the rock. In the desert cliffside. Carved with the same symbols as the one in the mine. And Naomi had gone inside. He had run. He had told the adults she was lost. And he had never, ever spoken of the door again. Now it was open again. Now she was calling. And he was beginning to remember what he had tried so hard to forget. He stumbled out of the chamber, heart racing, mind spinning. The mine narrowed again into tunnels. He passed the same twisted beams, the same stone outcroppings. But the deeper he went, the newer everything looked. As if he was moving backward, as if the mine was rebuilding itself around him. Eventually, he reached another room. Smaller. Cramped. Inside was a desk, old and wooden, covered in dust. On top sat a reel-to-reel recorder. Beside it, a notebook. He opened it. The handwriting was shaky, frantic. This town isn't a place. It's a memory, a loop. It doesn't let you leave because it needs you to stay. It eats guilt. It feeds on what we try to forget. And if you stay long enough, it becomes you. The last line was smeared, like tears had fallen on the ink. Elias turned on the recorder. The tape hissed, then played. A voice, male, broken. I saw her again last night, my wife. She's been dead 20 years, but here she walks, talks, smiles like nothing happened. But it's not her. It wears her. The town wears our pain like skin. Don't trust what you see. Don't stay. Don't. The tape ended in a burst of static. He stared at the machine, fingers numb. Dustvale wasn't haunted in the way most people imagined. It didn't house ghosts. It was the ghost. It recreated what you feared most, looped your regrets, made you relive them until you broke. That's why no one escaped. They didn't die. They became part of it. The mine groaned again. And then, laughter. Childlike, echoing from the next tunnel. Elias, the voice sang. Soft, sing-song. Naomi. He ran toward it, not because he wanted to, but because something in him had to, as if some part of him still believed he could save her. The tunnel opened into a chamber even larger than the last. It was shaped like a cathedral, stone arches, high ceilings, and in the center, a dining table. Covered in food, feast after feast, steaming, fresh. And seated at the table were people. People Elias had never seen but somehow recognized, from the photos, from the journals, from the town's memory. They turned toward him in unison, smiling, every eye black. At the head of the table sat Naomi. She looked up, and for just a moment, she was Naomi, not the twisted reflection, not the black-eyed imitation, just a little girl, alone. "Why did you leave me?" she asked. Elias fell to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. "I didn't know. I didn't understand." She tilted her head. "You let the door close." The candles around the table flickered. The walls pulsed again. The people at the table stood, slowly, calmly, and began to approach. Elias backed away, heart pounding, eyes wide. His flashlight died. Darkness swallowed the room. He felt hands touch him. Not grabbing, just brushing, as if checking if he was ready. He screamed again, but this time the echo didn't come back, and Naomi's voice whispered one last time, "Welcome home." The darkness didn't lift, not for hours, not for days, not for time as Elias Maddox understood it. After Naomi whispered, "Welcome home," he fell into something deeper than blackness. Not sleep, not death, just a void. When he finally woke up, if waking was the right word, he was lying on a wooden floor. Sunlight streamed through dirty glass. He sat up slowly. His head throbbed, his limbs were stiff, and his backpack, flashlight, and camera, all gone. It was warm. Dust motes danced in the air like ash in stillness. The walls were made of aged pine. There were crosses on them. He was in the chapel. But something was wrong. The chapel was intact, clean, not rotted or broken. The pews were neatly arranged, candles burned at the altar, and soft music hummed through the space. An old hymn, scratchy like it was playing from a gramophone. He stood. His boots echoed on the floor. He wasn't alone. Seated in the front row was a man, balding, wearing a tweed jacket, hands clasped in prayer. Elias stepped closer. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Hello?" The man turned. His face was wrong, not monstrous, not deformed, just blank. Like someone had forgotten to finish painting him. Eyebrows too light, skin too smooth, a smile too symmetrical. "Elias," the man said calmly, as if greeting a friend at a cafe. "You made it." "Where am I?" The man didn't answer. He stood and walked to the altar. On it sat a book, leather-bound, thick. The man opened it and turned the pages until he stopped on one. He pointed. Elias stepped forward and looked down. His name, Elias Maddox, below it. Born October 4th, 1992. Died, and under that, confession pending. Elias stepped back. "What is this?" The man turned to him again. "This is Dustvale. This is what we are." "I don't understand. Am I dead?" The smile grew wider. "You would have preferred that." Elias backed away. The chapel began to creak slowly. Not from weather, not from time, but from shifting. The walls seemed to stretch. The altar elongated. The pews multiplied. Reality was slipping again. The man's smile vanished. "She waits for you," he said. "She always has. You left her in the dark." "I was a child," Elias shouted. "I didn't understand. I was afraid." The man tilted his head. "Children aren't supposed to forget, but you did. You erased her." Elias's legs gave out. He sank to the floor, trembling. "I didn't mean to. I didn't." "But you did. And now she remembers." The candles blew out in unison, and the chapel vanished. Now Elias stood in the middle of Dustvale. The town was alive, not in the way it had been in old photographs. Alive as if the desert itself had become flesh. Buildings breathed, windows blinked, the sky pulsed blood red like a wound. Figures moved in the streets, not people, not entirely. Shadow things in the shape of humans. They walked the dirt roads with no destination, just movement. Elias wandered between them, unnoticed. He passed the general store. The door creaked open by itself. Inside, it was filled with toys. Naomi's toys. A row of dolls with glass eyes stared at him from the shelves. A rocking horse rocked on its own. A music box opened. The same lullaby. The tune from their childhood. The same one he heard in the hallway under the mine. He approached it. And the mirror on the far wall rippled like water. His reflection didn't follow him. It stayed still, and then it moved on its own, smiling. "You left me," the reflection said. "But I found someone else." The glass cracked. Elias screamed and turned, and Naomi stood at the doorway. 10 years old, barefoot, eyes wide. This time not black, not yet. She looked human, scared. "Why didn't you come after me?" she asked, voice trembling. "I tried," he whispered. "No, you didn't," she said. "You told them I vanished, but you didn't say what you saw. The door, the rock, the light." Tears streamed down Elias's cheeks. "I thought I imagined it. I thought it wasn't real." She walked closer. Each step echoed like thunder in his chest. "I waited," she said. "For years, I called for you. I'm sorry." She stopped inches away from him and smiled. "But I'm not." Her eyes turned black, and the dolls behind him started to laugh. The next hours were a blur. He ran again. Through buildings that changed behind him, streets bent at wrong angles, skies turned to ceilings. At one point, he found himself back in the mine. But it wasn't underground anymore. It floated, suspended in air above the desert. When he looked over the edge, he saw everything, every version of Dustvale, 1880, 1922, 1950, 2003, 2025, layered like a rotting onion. Time didn't move here. It looped, a broken record of suffering, and everyone who entered added their pain to the town's memory. Their guilt became its fuel. Naomi had become something else, a core, a keystone, but she wasn't the first. There had been others. Children who were forgotten, women who were blamed, men who buried what they did. Dustvale didn't need blood, it needed remorse. And Elias had been the perfect candidate, because for 25 years he pretended she didn't call for him. And now she was calling again. Eventually the town stopped shifting. He was standing in front of the chapel again, but now it was night, and the bell was ringing, over and over, no wind. No one pulling the rope. It rang on its own, calling. Elias stepped inside. Naomi sat at the altar, but she was no longer a child. She was 25, the age she'd be now. Her face was still, perfect, timeless. "You can leave," she said. Elias blinked. "What?" She smiled. "You can walk out of here. The town will let you, but only if you say it." "Say what?" "The truth." He hesitated. "You mean that I left you?" She tilted her head. "That's part of it." Elias clenched his fists. The candles around the chapel burned brighter. He felt the weight of decades behind his ribs, all the guilt, all the silence. And then he spoke. "I saw the door," he said, "in the desert wall. I saw you go inside, and I didn't follow. I was afraid. I thought it would take me too." He sank to his knees. "And then, I lied. I said you were just lost, that you wandered off. I let them blame you. I let you disappear." Tears dropped onto the chapel floor. "I forgot the sound of your voice. I forgot your laugh. I forgot you." The room shook. The bell stopped. Naomi stood. She walked down the aisle toward him. And for a moment he thought maybe, just maybe, she would forgive him. But as she reached out her hand, the skin peeled away. Her eyes turned hollow, and her voice echoed 1,000-fold. "And now, you will remember me forever." The floor gave way. Elias fell again. When he landed, he was back in the desert. His car was there, covered in dust. The sun was rising. The town was gone. No chapel, no mine, no buildings, just sand. Endless, untouched sand. Elias walked to the car, opened the door. His backpack was inside. Camera intact, water half full, phone charged. He turned it on. Signal. 1 bar. He sat in the driver's seat, stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His eyes were black. Elias Maddox sat behind the wheel of his dusty Subaru, staring into the rearview mirror at a reflection that no longer belonged to him. His eyes were black, not from lack of sleep, not from shadows. They were black, hollow, reflective, like pools of tar slicked across his sockets. No irises, no whites, just a void. And yet, he could still see. He blinked, and when his eyes opened again, they were back to normal. Blue-gray, slightly bloodshot. Was it real? A trick of the light? Or a glimpse? The town was gone. The desert lay before him, barren and wide. Not a single structure remained. No chapel, no mine, no rotted wooden signs. Even the rusted Dust Vale 7 miles ahead marker had vanished. He turned the key in the ignition. The engine stuttered, then roared to life. The road ahead was clear, and behind him, only sand. So he drove. He didn't look back. By the time Elias reached civilization, real civilization, it had been nearly 4 days since he entered Dust Vale, or maybe longer. He wasn't sure anymore. The first gas station he stopped at was in a town called Calico Ridge, a blink-and-you-miss-it dot on the map, but it felt like Times Square after what he'd been through. The hum of fluorescent lights, the synthetic scent of cleaner, a clerk chewing gum behind a bulletproof window. "Rough road trip?" the clerk asked when Elias came in, covered in dust and dried sweat. Elias gave a hollow smile. "Yeah," he said. "Something like that." He filled up his tank, bought a bottle of water, and sat in the parking lot for nearly 30 minutes, staring out at the highway. He felt normal. Too normal. Like waking up from a nightmare and realizing you're still dreaming. Everything had changed, but no one around him could tell. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling. A tremor he couldn't stop. 2 weeks later, Elias was back in his apartment in Denver. The sun rose and set like it always had. Traffic buzzed. The neighbors upstairs argued over music and rent. The cat from across the hall meowed when he passed. But nothing felt right. Not his bed. Not his walls. Not even his own skin. Dust Vale had left a residue on him, a psychic dust he couldn't shake off. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Naomi. Not as she was, as she is now. Ageless, perfect, and watching. He tried to forget. He really did. He deleted the files from his camera one by one, every photo, every video, except they wouldn't delete. Every time he dragged them to the trash, they reappeared. At first it was just one folder, Dust Vale, then it duplicated. Dust Vale 2, Dust Vale 3, Dust Vale 666. By the end of the week, his hard drive was full, and the photos changed. They weren't just of the town anymore. They were of him, sleeping, sitting in his kitchen, standing at the window. Photos he never took, and always in the corner of the frame, sometimes in the shadows, sometimes in the reflection, was Naomi, smiling. Elias stopped sleeping. He sat up each night with the lights on, knife in hand, camera turned off. Sometimes he thought he heard the tapping again, just like in the car outside Dust Vale. 3 knocks. Silence. 3 more. Once he opened the door. No one was there. But when he looked down the hallway, the walls had symbols carved into them, just like the ones on the mine door. The next morning they were gone. But his neighbors started avoiding him. He heard one of them whisper to another in the stairwell. He talks to himself. At night, loud, like he's arguing with a kid. Elias didn't bother correcting them, Because it was true. He was talking to her, and sometimes she talked back. Then the mail started. It began with a single envelope. No return address. Inside was a photo, black and white, a small church, and in front of it, a funeral. Rows of people dressed in clothes from the 1940s, and at the center, Elias, standing beside a coffin, staring at the camera. He flipped the photo over, scrawled in thick ink, "We remember." The next day, more envelopes arrived. Photos from different eras. Him in a saloon in 1881. Him building a railroad in 1910. Him in a black and white classroom in the 1960s. Different clothes, different settings, same face, same haunted eyes. Dustvale wasn't a place, it was a cycle, and now it lived inside him. Elias tried to escape again. He drove west, didn't pack anything, didn't tell anyone. He just started driving, through Utah, Nevada, into California. He kept going until he hit the edge of the Mojave, but the desert wasn't empty anymore. He pulled off onto a dirt road late one night. It wasn't on any GPS, no name, just a flicker on the screen. But when he reached the end of the road, he saw it. The chapel, the one from Dustvale. Intact. New. Candles burning in the windows, a bell swaying in the tower. He turned around, floored the gas pedal, drove until dawn. When he stopped for gas in Barstow, he looked down at the dust on his tires. It was red, like desert sand, but darker, sticky, almost like blood. Back in Denver, his apartment door was wide open. Inside, everything was gone, not stolen, just removed, as if the apartment had never been furnished. Walls bare, no outlets, no paint, no floors, just dust, thick and heavy. He coughed. His throat burned. When he looked up, a figure stood in the kitchen. A child, barefoot, hair long, eyes black. "Welcome back," she whispered. He blinked. She was gone, but the symbols were back, carved deep into the walls, this time glowing. He left that night, checked into a motel, burned his clothes in the parking lot. But the next morning, when he looked in the mirror, he was wearing them again, clean, untouched, same dust on the sleeves, same blood on the collar. He tried telling someone, a reporter friend, Tasha. She met him at a diner off Colfax Avenue. He looked haggard, thin, shaky. "I need to tell you about a town," he said. "Okay," she replied slowly. "Dustvale." Her face didn't change. She blinked, then smiled. "I think I've heard of it." He froze. "You have?" She nodded. "My uncle, he went there, in the 70s. Mining job, I think." Elias leaned in. "What happened to him?" She frowned. "Why do you ask?" "Because I was there, and no one comes back." Tasha paused, then whispered, "Neither did he." That night, Elias found another envelope in his motel room. He hadn't checked in with his name, but the envelope was on the pillow. Inside, another photo. Tasha, standing outside the chapel, smiling, eyes black. On the back, now she remembers too. The motel burned down 3 nights later. Electrical fire, they said. Elias survived. Barely. But something inside him had cracked. He stopped running. He stopped hiding. And one morning, just after dawn, he returned to the desert. Not to Dustvale, but to where it used to be. The empty stretch of nothing. He parked the car, got out, and waited. For hours. Then, as the sun began to set, the wind changed, the sand parted, and the town began to rise. Board by board, brick by brick. A chapel. A general store, a sheriff's office. The bell rang once, and Elias walked inside. Now he sits at the altar, candles burning, dust on his hands, eyes black, waiting. Because the town is hungry again, and someone always comes. A photographer, a hiker, a traveler, someone with guilt, someone who forgot, someone who thinks they're just passing through. And when they do, Elias will greet them, just like Naomi greeted him, with a whisper. Welcome home. There's a stretch of road in southern Colorado, flat, dry, cracked like old skin. It isn't marked on most maps. It doesn't show up on Google Earth. And if you ask locals about it, most will shake their heads, mutter something about bad tires, and change the subject. But if you drive that road long enough, if you ignore the silence that grows too loud, if you keep going, even when your GPS signal fades and the sky turns a dull, bruised yellow, you'll see a town. Not always, just sometimes. A flicker in the heat haze, a silhouette at sunset, wooden signs covered in sand, a bell tower, a chapel, dust veil, and if you see it, it's already too late. They say Elias Maddox went missing in 2025. Friends claimed he was working on a new photography series, a Lost Towns documentary project. His car was found weeks later on the side of a nameless dirt road, engine off, doors unlocked, a single photo on the dashboard. The photo showed him, standing in front of a chapel, eyes hollow, a faint smile on his lips. On the back, scribbled in charcoal, "This is where the silence lives." No sign of Elias was ever found, but sometimes, just sometimes, truckers passing through the desert swear they see someone walking along the shoulder, covered in dust, wearing a camera around his neck. If you pull over, if you ask if he needs help, he'll say just one thing. "You came back." And then he's gone, like a mirage. But not all ghosts are echoes. Some are anchors. Inside Dust Veil, time doesn't move. It loops, it fractures. You could spend an hour there and lose years. You could spend your entire life there and forget you ever had one. Elias learned that the hard way. When he stepped inside the resurrected town, the chapel greeted him like an old friend. The candles were always lit, the doors never closed. He walked the streets as if he'd never left. Only now, the town obeyed him. He could feel it, like veins under skin. Every building pulsed with the memory of someone, a life, a regret, a name long erased. They weren't just haunted, they were trapped. And Elias? He had become the latest conductor, the voice that welcomed new visitors, the presence in the mirror, the whisper on the radio static. He wasn't Elias anymore. He was what Dust Veil made him. Naomi still lived there too, but not as a girl, not as a ghost. She had become something else, a force, a memory carved into the foundations. Every night, when the bell tolled once at midnight, Elias would walk to the chapel and find her seated at the altar. Never older, never smiling, just waiting. They never spoke, because they didn't need to. They were the town now, two halves of the same scar, and Dust Veil fed on them. Every scream, every footstep in fear, every lie whispered into the dark. Dust Veil ate it all, and grew stronger. Sometimes new people would come, a vlogger chasing clicks, a lost couple with a dead phone, a bored teenager daring fate. They'd walk down Main Street, laughing nervously. They'd say things like, "Creepy but cool," or "Let's explore the mine," or "Bet it's just an old movie set." And Elias would follow them quietly, never too close, never too far. They'd hear the footsteps, turn around, see nothing. Until the town changed, buildings would shift, shadows would bend, mirrors would show memories they never told anyone. A drowning brother, a stolen kiss, a truth they'd buried. Because that's what Dust Veil wanted. Not blood, not flesh, guilt. Shame is salt to the earth, and Dust Veil thrives on salted ground. They always tried to leave. They never could. One man hiked into the desert until his legs gave out. When he opened his eyes, he was in the sheriff's office, wearing a deputy's uniform. Another woman smashed every window she could find, cut her hands, screamed herself hoarse. Now she works the saloon bar, pouring drinks for shadows with names she can't remember. And the children? They always find Naomi, and Naomi always smiles. What Dustvale is, was never fully known. Some say it was cursed by a grieving widow who buried her husband in the wrong grave and spoke a prayer she wasn't meant to say. Others believe it was the site of an ancient convergence, a fault line not of tectonics, but of memory and spirit, where time folds like paper and sorrow sinks like stone. Some think it was built this way, founded not on gold, but regret. They say the miners dug too deep, found more than ore, uncovered something that whispered, and listened. The town changed after that. It began to repeat. People lived whole lives, then started again, then again, then again. And with every loop, they forgot just a little more, until only the pain remained. Dustvale is what happens when trauma takes root, when it grows legs, when it builds a town around itself. You might think this is just a story, something to scare kids, something to keep hikers from wandering too far. But ask yourself, why are there no maps of Dustvale? Why is there no history in any database? And why do some people look too long at the desert and forget where they're going? Elias knew. In the final days, if they can be called days, he started writing in a notebook, pages and pages of names, memories, dates that never existed. He knew he was fading, not dying, just blurring. One entry read, "I used to think I left Naomi, but maybe she found Dustvale first, and then Dustvale found me." Another, "It doesn't want to be remembered. It wants to remember you." The last page simply said, "She's outside." That was the last thing Elias ever wrote. The chapel doors were found open the next night, the candles blown out, and a new photo appeared on the altar. A family, father, mother, daughter. The caption, "Next." So if you ever find yourself driving through Colorado, if the road grows too quiet, if the wind starts whispering your name, if your radio picks up a music box that plays a lullaby you thought you forgot, turn around. Don't look in the mirror. Don't answer the knocking. Because if you do, you'll see the chapel, the bell tower, and a figure standing by the roadside, dust in his hair, a camera around his neck, eyes black, smiling. You came back. Thank you for watching. If you hear knocking tonight, pretend you didn't. See you in the next nightmare. And if you think this was scary, just wait until what's coming next. Hit that bell and don't miss what's waiting for you.